Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today we're looking at a Turbo Rayquaza deck. It gains a few really big pieces to the deck that turns it from kind of meme tier into potentially very high tier. I think it gets a huge buff of damage and just raw energies that can hit the field now, thanks to a couple big Prism Star cards that's really going to make this deck a lot better. And that's really the concept of this deck. Tag teams are coming out, so why not reach into the plus 200 mark and take those 3 prizes all in one turn. That's what Rayquaza's hoping to do at the very least. And we have Tapu Koko Prism Star, which gives us an extra like 60 damage burst, whilst also setting up our Rayquazas much more easily now. And we have this Shaymin Prism Star as well, which is like a new Rayquaza, but it's a non-GX, and it only gives up 2 energy when it gets knocked out and only 1 prize card. So either people gust around the Rayquaza, the Shaymin, or they just knock it out, take us automatically onto odd prizes, and we only lose 2 energy cards. And sometimes we can recoup that energy much more easily in this deck as well, because we're going to play Naganadels to recover stuff. So the Turbo Rayquaza build has always sort of been in the shadow of the Vika Ray build, because you didn't have enough early game sort of burst damage and enough recovery. Now I think we have those things thanks to the Prism Stars. So let's look at these Pokemon. 4 of Rayquaza GX. Obviously, he is, alongside the Shaymin Prism Star, our main attacker. We're going to be moving into these big Dragon Break attacks. Trying to fill our board with energies is the main goal here. There's always the GX attack that we can fall back on as well for consistency. If we are going first, it's unlikely that we'll get a Dragon Break off without the help of like some big Koko Prism Star plays into energy switches. So it's more than likely that we'll go for either Rayquaza GX attack or Zeraora's GX attack on turn 1 going second. So that can give us a big hand, or we can get even more energies onto the board with the Zeraora. So those are both good 1 energy GX attacks that we have available to us for that early pressure to make sure that our turn 2 is going to be nuts. So yeah, Rayquaza, really, really important piece, of course. We're going to play the Shaymin Prism Star. Free Retreat is another huge thing about this card. It's absolutely nuts, really. There's nothing bad about this guy. 30 times, just the same as the Dragon Break attack, and it costs 2 grass, which obviously we're playing in here, so it just fits straight into the deck. The Koko Prism Star also fits right on in there. When it puts itself to the Lost Zone, that's an extra 60 damage, and it sets up those rays. 2 Zeraora GX, its GX attack can really help out against Mill and just other tag team style matchups where you just want to get even more burst damage onto the board. There's no point going for 2 shots of Ray. You may as well build up to 1 shots and then just maintain those 1 shots. So that's a GX attack that we have to bear in mind. Thunderclap Zone means that our chunky 3 retreat cost Rayquazas aren't that chunky anymore. We can just move between them. So if they're tanking hits, we can try and protect energy cards and force our opponent to gust around them, which is nice. And his Plasma Fist attack can do 160 for Lightning, Colorless. We're not playing Choice Band in this deck, so it's rarely getting 1-shots. But it's worth noting as an attack if we really need him in a pinch. If the Rayquaza route hasn't gone so well, we can still do some decent base damage here. Playing a 2-2 line of Naganadel, I think physically for bench space we don't have much more room than the 2-2 line, and we're already playing Treasures and Ultra Space as our stadium, so although it's a thin line, we get them into play quite quickly. And because we're using so many Stormy Winds early, we need to keep our bench space open for the Koko Prism Star, sometimes Let Loosing, sometimes Wonder Tagging, sometimes we need Zeraora for retreat reasons. There's only really space for the 2-2 line, so that's why we're going thin here. 1 copy of Let Loose. I think when you're playing a treasure deck, it's always nice. It gives us an extra sort of hand reload and can keep us sort of going on a turn, which is really nice when we have so many sort of turbo cards in the deck. It feels like a reasonable option, and it's our disruption that we have available to us. And 2 copies of Lillie to try and get big Lillies turn 1, or to get Sightseer turns if we need to get a big burst of discard going on for Stormy Winds and for our Koko Prism and all that stuff. So the Lillies are going to help out for consistency. Onto the item cards, couple of rescue stretchers. Obviously we have Stormy Winds, which is going to be discarding stuff from the top of our deck, so recycling some pieces that just get thrown into there is going to be big. 3 copies of E-Switch, so the Naga is not only charging themselves up for damage purposes, but they also help maintain our Rayquazas throughout the game. Going to play 3 copies of Ultra Ball alongside 4 copies of Mysterious Treasure. This is going to be all of our search. The treasure is nuts in here. It gets all your Rays and all your Nagas and Lele's and Let Loose. The Ultra Ball a bit more versatile in that it can grab your Prism Stars out and your Zeraora, but of course a bit more painful of a discard. For Acro Bike, we like discarding things in this deck. We're trying to motor through as quickly as possible. Getting energies in the bin is always a priority, so Acro Bike is really nice. I'm playing one cheeky copy of Wishful Baton. It's a little bit wishful for me to have this in the deck, to be honest. I was thinking, there was a point where I had 2 choice bands, and then I was like, they're really not pulling their weight, and I wanted to have an extra supporter in the deck, so I just cut, and instead of just having 1 choice band, I thought 1 Wishful Baton would be more impactful of a card if you actually let it stick on the board, because it's going to maintain our damage output a bit better. So I feel like it's not a huge card in here. It's definitely flexible for maybe a consistency card or something like that. But for now, I feel like it can create a big swing in a game if it just sticks for a turn, and then you're just going to really run riot over a board. And 2 copies of Ultra Space to help thin the deck even more and get our Nagas into play, as well as just be counter stadiums in general. And then for supporters, we're playing a couple copies of Lillie, really good early game options, especially if we're already drawing into like treasures, Ultra Balls, and Acro Bikes. We'll have plenty of discard. We just want to get a big hand going. 3 copies of Guzma alongside 3 copies of Sightseer, giving us extra discards for everything else we need to get rid of, mainly energy cards. And 4 copies of Cynthia for some nice shuffle draw, always going to be helpful. For the energy, we're playing 14. Now, I've gone as high as 16 before with this list. It does get a little clunky sometimes if you don't draw into your Sightseers. Basically, I've had a list that has played 4 Sightseer and 16 energy cards, and you get them in the bin early, and that's really great, but sometimes you can end up just not drawing anything but energy cards, and that's kind of risky. So at the moment, I'm sticking with the count that a Vika Ray goes with, but I could definitely see this going even higher, because honestly, you want to bin, like, if you could put 5 energy in your discard pile turn 1, like, you will, because Stormy Winds, Koko Prism, and Naganadel, like, it's all good. Just get it all into the discard pile and you'll recover them. That's pretty much the idea, so you do want to see as many of these as possible. I think if I was going to go to 8 on either of them, I would go to 8 on the Lightning Energy, even though the Grass Energy has synergy with Rayquaza and Shaymin. I feel like the 8th energy for the Koko Prism to pop itself early is really important, because you want to free up that bench space for more Stormy Winds and Poipoles and stuff. So I think the Lightning Energy is actually the premium one in this deck, despite the Shaymin and the Rayquaza. I think those are actually the best ones. So there's the full list. Take a screenshot now if you really want to. As always, it's in the description as well. But onto the tech options. I thought about choice bands, as I've mentioned already. It gives us that little extra like effective burst damage, which is nice. But I feel like if we're just drawing into more energy cards and bidding them more often, we're going to have a higher win rate. I thought about playing Thunder Mountain as well. That would enable us to use things like Zeraora a bit more effectively. It gives us, again, just an extra counter stadium. And it would open up the doors to playing something like Zapdos in the deck for some turn 1 early aggression. This deck typically is just using a GX attack for its first attack. If it's not going straight into Dragon Breaks on like a turn 2 when you've gone first. So having the Zapdos in here can allow us to do better early pressure against some lower HP things, just to start that pressure on the board and just build the raise behind them. And I think that's pretty reasonable. Like, you don't mind losing 1 Lightning Energy on a Zapdos just because you can Naga it back and stuff. So I think Zapdos is just such a strong card. We're already playing Zeraora. I want to consider it just for the sake of it, but bench space does get a little tight with this deck. I think that's a similar reason why I'm not playing these other non-GX Pokemon, the Shining Genesect and the Bulu. These are cards that you could consider if you want to improve your matchup against other non-GX builds. Really, I've just gone all out for the Rayquaza approach, but this doesn't have much of a game plan against the non-GX stuff without these guys, so you could think about weaving these in as you like. And then you could tinker around with the supporter count as well. I've done it, definitely. I've tried 4 Sightseers, I've tried 1 Lillie, I've tried no Cynthia. So I've tried all sorts in this build. At the moment, I'm liking where it's at, but I could definitely see you trying to weave in the likes of Erica, Ningo, and Emmett, because they're pretty reasonable options in the deck. So for the matchup overview, I think it's the non-GX stuff, which is always going to be the concern. Gramble is obviously horrible. White Kyurem also hits similar numbers. Gardevoir I've put kind of as a weak matchup. I think it could be okay, but it does take a lot for us to ramp up to 230, especially if the Guardia is just simply 1 energy bopping 3 off every single turn. So I essentially think if they get like 1 turn of Gardevoir survival, it's going to be really bad for you. And then all of these new decks that are potentially coming out in the set may be bad matchups for us. I mean, we do have things like Let Loose to improve the likes of Aerodactyl, Nidoqueen, and Tool Drop to a certain extent to maybe slow them down, but at the end of the day, we just don't have enough non-GXs to throw at them that can do good work. I think it'll be the non-GXs that usually take over the deck, and it'll just be too much pressure for you. On to the closing thoughts. I think this deck does get a huge boost from these two Prism Stars. Its damage output gets through the roof on like turn 3, and the Shaymin having free retreat is another reason why it's just nuts. Maybe you could even cut to 1 Zeraora now because of that card. I think it's just really, really good for the deck. It definitely wants to see GX stuff. One matchup I didn't say was that bad was Zoroark Lycanroc. I think if they do play Weavile, it'll be hard for you, obviously, because we have so many Stormy Winds and stuff. But yeah, this deck in general wants to see GX stuff, especially tag teams. Like, if someone just starts a tag team that you can just prey on later on, it's going to be nuts. And the other concern is, of course, Stormy Winds. I've said how important these two Prism Star cards are. If you just randomly Stormy Winds early, which you normally have to do with this deck, if you just get the wrong pieces at the wrong time, it's going to be horrible for you. If you lose out on your Koko Prism, if you lose out on a couple extra Guzmas, stuff like that, it's always going to be a concern for this deck, and it's just something, it's just part and parcel of this list that you can't control those sorts of things. We try our best to recover our energy cards, we try our best to recover Pokemon with a couple stretchers, but the Prism Stars and the supporters are completely out of our control, so that's something that we have to bear in mind. But overall, I do think this is out of meme tier and into, you know, potentially more respectable, and I think it's got good potential going forward. So let me know what you guys think about this list and the archetype itself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. For now, though, it has been Joe from OmniPoke, and I'll see you in another team-up video soon. Cheers.